The creature called itself the Graviton. It was a being of pure information, a sentient cosmic string that had woven itself into the fabric of space-time. For eons, it had drifted through the galaxy, observing, calculating. It had seen empires rise and fall, watched species burn their own worlds, and build new ones from the ashes. It had learned one universal truth. All sentient life followed patterns. The insectoid Krillix would always expand until they overpopulated and collapsed. The avian wren would always choose artistic expression over technological advancement. The crystalline Cethon would always prioritize geometric perfection, even at the cost of survival. Pattern, predictability, control. The Graviton found it boring, and so it devised a game. It began to nudge, to whisper, to influence. It would offer a species a brilliant leap in technology, faster than light travel, unlimited energy, perfect medicine. Then it would watch. The pattern was always the same. The technology would be used to consolidate power, to wage war, to create utopias for a few and hells for the many. The gift would always, eventually, become a tool for self-destruction. The Graviton found this pattern amusing. Then it found Earth. It was a backwater planet, teeming with a loud, chaotic, and violently short-lived species that called themselves humans. They were a mess. They fought each other over lines on maps and invisible gods in the sky. They polluted their own nest. They were, by all observable data, following the same tired pattern as every other species. They would burn out in a few thousand years, leaving behind a radioactive cinder. The Graviton prepared its standard offer. It would give them the secret to clean, limitless fusion power. It waited for the predictable result. The largest nations would hoard the technology, using it as a weapon of economic leverage, leading to a series of smaller conflicts that would eventually escalate into a devastating world war. Pattern. It was wrong. The discovery wasn't made by a government or a corporation. A brilliant, eccentric physicist named Dr. Eris Thorne, working on a shoestring budget at a university no one had ever heard of, stumbled upon the Graviton's subtle nudge. He didn't see a weapon. He saw a way to power a desalination plant in a drought-stricken region. He published his findings, openly, for free. The Graviton was confused. This wasn't in the pattern. The expected power grab didn't happen. Instead, 1,000 different groups, from nation-states to small villages, took the blueprint and adapted it. Some used it for energy, others for manufacturing. A collective of artists used it to create a floating light show that could be seen from space. It was chaotic, inefficient, and utterly unpredictable. Fascinated, the Graviton decided to try again. This time, it offered the secret to a universal pathogen cure. It waited for the predictable hoarding, the black markets, the use of the cure as a political tool to control populations. Instead, a global network of pharmacists and doctors communicating in real time on a decentralized network humans called the Internet immediately began mass-producing the cure. They didn't ask for payment. They set up distribution centers in every major city, in remote villages, even in the territories of their historical enemies. They cured a planet-wide plague in a matter of months, not through centralized power, but through chaotic, beautiful cooperation. No pattern, no predictability. The Graviton was now deeply intrigued. It decided to escalate. It gave them the mathematics for a stable wormhole, a gateway to the stars. It waited. Surely now the pattern would hold. The fear of the unknown, the desire for new resources, the territorial imperative, it would lead to conflict. They would send military ships first. They would claim the new worlds for their old nations. It was wrong again. The first ship through wasn't a battleship. It was an unarmed vessel, crewed by a multinational team of scientists, artists, and philosophers. They called it the Seeker. Their mission statement, which the Graviton monitored with a growing sense of bewilderment, was simply to see what's there, to say hello. They sent back data, not declarations of sovereignty. They sent back art, music, and poetry inspired by the alien sky. They built a small station on the other side and named it Port Welcome. This defiance of pattern was irritating. And then, it became threatening. The Graviton's entire existence was based on observation and prediction. It was the fundamental principle of its being. If life could be unpredictable, then the universe was chaos, and chaos was something it could not compute. It had to reassert control. It had to force humanity into a predictable mold. It chose its tool carefully. A warlord on a fringe colony, a man named Kalen Vance. He was ambitious, ruthless, and charismatic. The Graviton began whispering to him in his dreams, showing him visions of power, giving him strategic insights, subtly guiding his every decision. It fed him technology just slightly beyond what the rest of humanity possessed. It created a pattern it understood, the rise of a conqueror. Kalen united the scattered colonies of the Proxima Centauri system under a brutal, efficient regime. He called his domain the Vance Ascendancy. He built a war fleet, not from aggression, but from a cold, calculated philosophy of preemptive security. He saw the disorganized, chaotic governments of Earth and the other colonies as a threat to his ordered society. They were a virus of unpredictability, and he was the cure. For years, the Cold War simmered. The Graviton watched, pleased. This was a pattern it recognized. Two powers, one chaotic and free, one ordered and tyrannical, staring at each other across the void, destined for conflict. It was only a matter of time before the predictable happened. The tyrant would strike. And he did. The Vance Ascendancy Fleet, a collection of sleek, dark warships built for maximum destruction, dropped out of warp space near Earth's moon. It was a flawless tactical maneuver, fed to Kalen by the Graviton itself. Earth's defense forces, a hodgepodge of repurposed civilian ships, and a few dedicated but underfunded military vessels, scrambled to meet them. The battle was, by any tactical measure, over before it began. The Ascendancy's ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their coordination absolute. They cut through the first line of defense like a hot knife through butter. Earth was about to fall. Kalen Vance, standing on the bridge of his flagship, the Final Order, felt a surge of cold triumph. This was destiny. This was order imposing itself on chaos. The Graviton, observing from its hidden dimension, felt a sense of profound satisfaction. Finally, the pattern was restored. Humanity, faced with an overwhelming, predictable threat, would either be conquered or would unite under a single, predictable leader to fight back. Either way, they would become predictable. But Vance had forgotten something crucial. He had been a human once. The Graviton, for all its cosmic wisdom, had never truly understood what that meant. It had given him the tools for conquest, but it hadn't accounted for the chaotic, unpredictable nature of the human heart. As the Final Order prepared to launch its final assault, its weapons charged and targeting solutions locked, a young communications officer on the bridge, a woman named Lena, did something utterly illogical. She opened a channel to the entire Ascendancy fleet. She didn't broadcast a plea for mercy or a threat of retaliation. She broadcast a memory. It was a simple, grainy video from her childhood, stored on her personal data slate. It showed her and her brother playing in a field on their home colony. Her brother, a boy named Finn, had fallen and scraped his knee. He was crying. Lena, just a child herself, had knelt down, wiped his tears, and shown him a funny-looking bug crawling on a blade of grass. Finn had stopped crying and started laughing. The broadcast went out to every ship in the fleet. For a moment, there was silence. Then, on a dozen ships, other personal memories began to leak out. A soldier on a destroyer shared a memory of his mother's cooking. A pilot on a frigate shared the feeling of the first time she'd flown a flimsy atmospheric skimmer. A gunnery officer on a cruiser shared a memory of his dog, waiting for him by the door. It was chaos. It was sentiment. It was everything the Graviton's ordered mind abhorred. It was also inexplicably contagious. The cold, disciplined crews of the Ascendancy fleet were suddenly flooded with the chaotic, unpredictable, and deeply personal memories of their comrades. They saw each other not as cogs in a perfect machine, but as people, as humans. Kalen Vance roared in fury, ordering the transmission to be cut, the officers to be arrested, but it was too late. The pattern was broken. The predictable attack never came. Instead, the Ascendancy fleet argued. Ship-to-ship communications became a chaotic mess of conflicting orders, personal appeals, and emotional debates. Some ships powered down their weapons. Others formed a defensive ring around Earth, not to attack, but to protect. A few, loyal to Vance, prepared to fire, but their crews, overwhelmed by the shared humanity of the moment, mutinied. The Graviton watched, its vast consciousness reeling. It had seen empires fall to plagues, to invasions, to economic collapse. It had never, in all its eons, seen a fleet neutralized by childhood memories and the smell of a mother's cooking. It was statistically impossible. It was illogical. It was human. The Battle of Earth ended without a single shot fired in anger. Kalen Vance, isolated and alone on his flagship, was arrested by his own crew. He looked out at the stars, not with the cold fury of a thwarted conqueror, but with the bewildered confusion of a man who had just seen the fundamental rules of his reality rewritten. The Graviton had given him the tools of absolute power, but it had forgotten to account for the one thing that made humans so dangerous: their complete and utter lack of predictability. The Graviton withdrew, deeply shaken. It had tried to force humanity into a box, and humanity had not only broken the box, but had used the pieces to build 1,000 beautiful, chaotic, and illogical things. It retreated to the void between galaxies to recalculate, to try and find a new equation, a new pattern that could explain the beautiful, terrifying anomaly that was humanity. And on Earth, life went on. The crews of the former Ascendancy fleet were welcomed not as conquerors, but as long-lost relatives. The memories that had won the battle were collected and archived, not as military secrets, but as a testament to the strange, powerful, and utterly unpredictable force that held humanity together. They called it the Shared Sky, a digital tapestry of 1,000,000 personal moments, a weapon of mass construction that had proven far more powerful than any weapon of mass destruction. The universe had learned a valuable lesson that day. When dealing with humans, expect nothing. Prepare for everything. And never, ever try to put them in a box. Because they won't just break out. They'll turn the box into a puppet, put on a show, and invite you to laugh along. And that, in the end, was the only pattern that mattered. No pattern, no predictability, just victory.